In this episode of our investing training series, Paul is going to walk through how to create a 5-year plan.
So let's go ahead and talk about how do we build that portfolio. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use words, we're going to use numbers, we're going to use graphics. But I think what we're going to try to do here is just show you how this grows and how it grows exponentially. So we like to think of this as the ABCs of wealth creation. The A stands for accumulation. That is where we're accumulating the assets necessary to hit financial independence. B is for building equity, and C is for consumption. Now, you'll notice we're going to say this many times, but start where you are. The sooner you start, the better your impact or result can be. So how do people do this? Most people start off with their primary residence. Most people are aware that you can buy a single family home or a condo as a primary residence, but a lot of people, in fact, I'd say majority of people aren't aware that the same loan you get a house or a condo with is called conforming financing, is actually defined as 1 to 4 residential units. So you can buy a 4-unit apartment building with the same kind of loan that you can buy a house or a condo with. It's called conforming financing. So most people start off with a single family house. We've had huge successes, particularly getting young investors who are already living in apartments to buy a small apartment building as an owner occupant. And that way they can use the income from the other tenants to help build. If they could have qualified for, say, 500, now maybe they qualify for a purchase price of $1 million because of that income coming in from those other tenants. So just a thought. But the bottom line is people start with their primary residence and they assimilate that property and wait for the market to appreciate. So in other words, when the market's worth more, when the house, the property, whether it's a condo, single family, fourplex, what have you, when it's worth more than it was when they bought it, then they use that equity and move on to the next property. Now, there are common ways that people do this. The most common, people will sell a property and use their equity to buy a more expensive property, but it's still moving from their house to a house where they're paying for everything. We like to look at the idea of a couple of different things, but how about staying in your house, accessing some of that equity through a cash out refinance, and then buying an investment property. So you buy another property, you increase your asset base, but you've got tenants coming in and bringing in more money. So that's a way to do it. Another way to do it is to go ahead and rent out your current property, your first property, and go buy another property as an owner occupant. So in this example, we're going to go ahead and talk about replacing yourself with a tenant. So in this example, we're going to access that equity and we're going to start building tenants, and we're going to do this through refinancing and repositioning that equity into a second property. So let's go to that next slide where you see we've got a single family house. We do a cash out refi. We access some of that equity. And the first thing that we do is add to liquidity, because as we build our portfolio, we need liquid reserves. It's the first pillar for a reason. Then we use the remainder of the money that we got from that cash out refinance and use it as a down payment on a duplex. So now, instead of just having a single family home, we've got more cash and reserves, and we have 2 income producing units in the form of a duplex. So we've got a second property of 2 units, which has 2 tenants in it. So guess what? 2 properties appreciate twice as fast as 1. Let's go to that next slide, please. We encourage people to stay with conforming properties until they build what we call critical mass. Remember, we talked about accumulation, the A. Many times, it's a very common question. People say, well, Paul, isn't commercial real estate more efficient? Yes, it is. But it costs 2 to 3 times as much to get into as far as the wealth that's necessary, down payment requirements and cash flow requirements and that kind of thing. So building wealth is much more efficient with conforming financing, 1 to 4 residential units, and commercial real estate becomes more of an option as your portfolio grows and is more advanced. So the second thing we're looking at is when we take this property, we've got the single family home and we've got the duplex. Now it takes half the time for that market to appreciate typically. So in other words, We need that market appreciation to increase the rents in the rental property, the values in the property, and give us the ability to access equity through cash out refinance again. So now we do that cash out refinance. Those rents have gone up in that duplex, right? So we can take money out of that duplex up to the amount that the rents have gone up and have no hit on our cash flow. The tenants are paying for the additional cash that's been taken out of the rental property. And we take that cash, we add it to liquidity, we start to build our investment grade life insurance pillar, and we use down payment for a couple of triplexes in this example. So now, instead of having just one home, they've got a home, they've got a duplex, and they've got 2 triplexes. So now on 4 properties, and they have 8 tenants providing them income every single month. They're utilizing leverage through mortgages and accessing equity, as well as purchasing the property. They're using other people's effort in the form of tenants, those tenants that are going to work and then writing them a check every month. And they're building out the other pillars of their portfolio. So once that critical mass is achieved, then we want to let that equity grow. And we want to get that equity into a little bit larger position, provides additional security. We maintain and continue to build our reserves. As that equity builds, rent increases, we continually maintain the reserves. Now commercial real estate can become a legitimate option because our wealth situation is different. So in this example, you'll see they refinanced their 3 properties, the duplex and the 2 triplexes, and get cash out of that. And they take that, continue to build out those pillars, and now commercial real estate becomes a legitimate option. Now, we have clients do this in a number of different ways. The 2 most common are that they'll take that equity out and they'll keep the duplex, the 2 triplexes, and the commercial apartment building. Some people will liquidate the duplexes and the 2 triplexes and do a 1031 tax-deferred exchange into the new apartment building. We've had people do all of those types of things. For example, we've got a client we've worked with for about 20 years now that probably 2 or 3 years ago, they sold their smaller conforming apartments and they bought a large commercial apartment building. Then they started buying the small triplexes and fourplexes again to build the down payment to buy another commercial apartment building. But bear in mind, the whole idea of the 5-year plan is we're looking 5 years out and we're updating it every year. So we make sure we're doing what's most efficient for you.